Excellent. Hi, everybody. Before we go any further, I'll just acknowledge country and pay our respects to the Gumbaynggirr people, who are the traditional owners of the land that we're all meeting on, I think. I'm not sure where you are, Mark. Oh, yes, you're in Coffs, aren't you?
Yeah.
And just acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. And also just, note the really exciting news about the Indigenous protected area across the Promised Land and the work that the Urungara Aboriginal Corporation are doing, which is pretty exciting step forward in terms of land custodianship. So just want to start by doing that. And I think you all know that I'm Kerry, so I don't need to introduce myself. This is a little bit of an experiment for us. Most people who've joined us are regulars at our monthly learning circle, but which is always either only face-to-face or a couple of times we've had a hybrid. But this is the first time we've done it entirely online, and we're doing it deliberately as a bit of an experiment because we've had a lot of feedback from people who are keen for us to develop resources from the learning circle that can then be used. So we're doing this among friends. It's the first time we've done it, and we're skilling ourselves up to learn as we go. So please bear with us if anything, if the techno goddess isn't on our side. I'd like to particularly welcome Mark Smyth from BCU and P&I Group, who's joining us today as our key speaker. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Kerry. Lovely to be here.
It's really great to have you here. And because there's not too many of us, what we wanted to do was to just ask people in the chat to just introduce yourselves. There's a few people who may not know each other, and just where you're from and what your interest is in joining this session as we kick off. And while we do that, I just also wanted to say, could we all stay on mute unless you actually want to talk, so we can reduce the background noise. Introduce ourselves on chat and use the chat throughout if you'd like to. And Mark is very happy to have participative discussion as we go. He has a bit of a presentation. So if people know the convention of raising your hand on the screen, and Rose and I are together in the Sustainability Centre, and we'll both keep an eye out for that. And if you miss it, Mark will just bring you in. So how are we going with the chat? Has that started? Yeah, great. So it is my great pleasure to welcome you today, Mark. You're with a group of people who, many of whom have been involved in the Housing Matters Action Group from inception and often come to the Learning Circle. I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure working with Mark this year. He's joined the Community Land Trust Advisory Group with a sort of, someone who has a lot of expertise in finance hat on, and is doing some serious thinking about how BCU might be able to support the development of finance options for community land trust residents. That's still a bit of an open space, but in the course of that, Mark's been working with us and thinking about affordable housing more broadly. And we were, I have to say, just slightly envious, Mark, when you were able to join the international study tour on co-ops. But we're so pleased that you went, because you've come back with a lot of insights and great ideas and some great thinking about the role that mutual banks can play in the affordable housing space, as well as co-ops and community land trusts and all things of great interest to us. So we're really pleased you could join us today. Mark's got a presentation that goes for about 30 minutes, but as I said, if anyone wants to ask questions and comment on the way through, please just stick up your hand and we'll make it as participative as possible. And then when Mark's finished, we'll also have some time for further discussion. How does that sound? Is everyone's tech okay? Everyone can see and hear and all of that stuff's working? Yes. Okay. So Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Kerry. Thank you very much. That's a really generous intro. I feel like, and this is not the Mutual Appreciation Society, I promise, but I certainly feel like I'm the privileged one and the lucky one getting to work with you and every member of the advisory group. I think it's been a really interesting, fun year of learning. Like it's certainly challenged me, and I know a lot of my colleagues here in the bank to think very differently about how we approach I'd probably call it traditional, conventional lending, which is a good thing because, you know, we've got to kind of try and break the mold here. We have a problem that we need to lean into. And so I'm happy to admit, working in the industry, that I contribute to that in a particular way. But I like to think that equally, I am, you know, trying to take action to you know, make some positive change to the industry that we can hopefully leave things a little bit better for others, particularly those in our local community in this instance. So really looking forward to spending a little bit of time with you all this afternoon. And I certainly don't want to pitch myself as an expert in the affordable housing space or anything like that. I am a banker, but I'm a good banker. So I work in cooperative banking, as we call it, or you might be more familiar with the term customer-owned banking. BCU Bank, for those of you that you know, a local, or you know, you probably had some exposure to BCU Bank and other customer-owned banks. We're a little bit different to the listed banks, and I promise up front this is not a sales pitch either. We are wholly owned by our customer base. We don't have shareholders as listed banks do that potentially cause conflict in as far as our values and as far as why we exist. We absolutely exist to return benefit to our customers and to our communities who essentially own us. So that's one of the reasons why I've sort of taken steps to get a little bit more involved with the affordable housing issue and why I'm really loving working with the CLT. We spent some time last year as a bank interviewing and running focus sessions with many of our customers to try and understand what are the things that are really important to you in your local community, what are the things that you want us advocating for as your customer-owned bank, where should we be investing our time and resources? And housing was one of those issues that just kept popping up more and more and more as we went through that process. So when, you know, very fortuitously, Kerry came along and we happened to have a conversation towards the end of last year, I just couldn't say no. I just thought this is such an interesting and compelling opportunity to explore, and, you know, we've got to do more. So anyway, that's in a bit of a nutshell, that's how I've kind of come to be involved in the Community Land Trust. But look, I'm just going to attempt to share my screen. I'm not a Zoom expert. We tend to use Teams in my world, so this is equally a good opportunity to get outside of my comfort zone and try something a bit different. Let me know if this is coming up okay. Looks good? Excellent. So I promise that I will try not to bore you with too many slides and words on a page. There are a few words on the page, but I'll try and keep it a little bit more interactive. But like Kerry said, please, you know, throw some questions at me if there's anything that you'd like to know. I thought today, just a quick intro on me. I am the Executive General Manager of BCU Bank and also PNN Bank. So I look after the BCU business or brand in its footprint. So for those of you that know, we exist at BCU from Newcastle all the way up to the Sunshine Coast. We have 17 branches. We've got a contact centre here in Coffs. We have pretty much all of the different operational components that any bank would have. We do feed into our parent group, which is PNN Bank, equally is a customer-owned bank as well. We merged back in 2019, and since then we've grown and had so many more resources behind us to deliver many more benefits to our customers. So there is a news article you'll probably be aware of at the moment, a bit of a merger in the works with Beyond Bank. We're still working through that process at the moment, but that would give us such a bigger launch pad, I guess, to be able to return so many more benefits to so many more Australians, not just necessarily here on the East Coast. So we're looking forward to seeing how that progresses over the coming months. But yeah, as I said, I'm an advocate for cooperative banking. I live and breathe it. I have been working in cooperative banking since around 2018. Up until that point, I worked in the listed banks. I used to get up every morning and tell myself that I was making a difference, and then had a bit of an existential crisis there at one point, and then happened to sort of come across customer banking, which has just had me excited each and every day to get up and know that what we do here, we are really truly making a difference. And you know, we are so connected to the voice of our customers, and it's a nice feeling in this industry, let me tell you. One of my many of my focuses include, I guess, you know, delivering financial security to as many Australians as we can. I think customer banking is certainly Australia's best kept secret. It's something that we've got to talk more about. We know that around 8 out of 10 people have some form of account or connection to a cooperative bank, but around 70% of millennials, as an example, have no idea what cooperative banking actually means. So there's a real disconnect there that we have to, you know, try and bridge that gap. Some areas of passion for mine in banking are inclusion, accessibility, equity, empathy, and respect. So I am quite an advocate within the business as well around DEI and ESG. I'm on our RAP committee. I have an Indigenous background. My grandfather is a Barkinji elder. So I'm deeply connected to the First Nations people and culture. And equally, I'm also the advocate for equity when it comes to gender balance, when it comes to any area within this business, I think, that requires anyone to have a voice at the table to help with the decisions that need to be made. I'm there, and I'm the one that's championing that in the business. I've talked about Waterfall Way in terms of my involvement there. Certainly, I am a passionate supporter of mental health. I work with Lifeline North Coast. I'm one of the volunteer directors. And I get through that role, get to see firsthand more of the impacts that things like the cost of living crisis and money have on people and their mental health. And it's nice for me, and I think important for me, to be really aware of that in my role, to help with the decisions that, you know, need to be made each and every day, and also equally some of the initiatives really that I should be driving and championing across the business and with my team as well. So I get a real kick out of my involvement in supporting the amazing volunteers that really keep Lifeline afloat each and every day. And I'm also a proud parent of 4 kids. 4, I don't know what we were thinking, but anyway, it was a good idea at the time. But equally, and like many people on this call, concerned for their future and the impacts the housing crisis is having on them and more broadly the community. So that's me in a nutshell. So what I was thinking we talk about today is just giving a little bit of an overview of cooperatives, just to make sure that, you know, there's some clarity around what that is, because I do talk to that a little bit through the my reflections of the affordable housing study tour that I undertook back in April. So just want to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page there, and also as an advocate for cooperatives, I want to make sure that, you know, you've got a view of what they look like and who some of the maybe more popular businesses and brands are that are actually cooperatives. And then I thought we'd, you know, just talk a little bit about how cooperative banks or customer-owned banks can support affordable housing models, and certainly some of the ways that we're trying to support the Waterfall Way CLT model today. So, and like I said, throw any questions at me as we go along. So what is a cooperative? There'll be some brands there or logos there that you will no doubt be familiar with. They are all cooperatives in Australia. So simply, they're organisations that are owned and controlled by their members for a common benefit. So they're traditionally based on values of self-help, self-responsibility, equality, and solidarity. Like BCU, we back in the 1970s, there were several banana growers here on the Coffs Coast who weren't able to obtain finance from the bigger banks at that time, and listed banks. They were seen as a risk because they were subleasing land to grow their bananas on. So they decided, well, why not create our own bank? Lots of bravery and very bold to even think that way. I'm trying to think of a situation where people might actually think like that today, and I'm a little bit stuck for it. So the banana growers at the time created the Banana Coast Credit Cooperative. And here we are today as BCU Bank, and we've certainly evolved over the years, but certainly still we stay true to those original cooperative values, which are all around, equality, equity, and solidarity. Members of cooperatives can benefit from economies of scale as well, so through combined purchasing, distribution, or marketing power or influence of the group. And they share in the group's investment and operational risks and losses as well as its benefits. You'll see a couple of really familiar names there. I mean, Norco is such a great example, one of the bigger cooperatives that we have in Australia that is based, not so far from here. And certainly, if you're ever in the supermarket and you're considering which milk should I purchase in terms of, benefit back to the farmer, I mean, you're not going to get much better than Norco. Certainly, removing the middle person and all the associated costs from the equation as Norco do, and being able to return all those profits immediately back to farmers is something that I think we should all be really interested in, and certainly something that we should, where we're able to, prioritise when we're making important purchases. They're now the only cooperative dairy company in Australia, so one that we should all back and get behind. But no doubt there's some other brands there that you're quite familiar with, and if you weren't, then yeah, check them out and see if you're able to support them. As I said before, around 8 in 10 of us are doing business with a co-op, but most don't realise, and there is a real lack of awareness around what cooperatives are in this country. So certainly something that I'm really keen to promote if you haven't already picked up on that. Around 160,000 jobs are supported by cooperatives in Australia, spanning around 68,000 small and medium-sized businesses. That's a massive contribution to the economy. And equally, when you're thinking about more profits going back to the producers, more of the profits go back into the community and the members. That is something that we should really all be aiming to help grow and see prosper. And then, just because I like, different facts, and, I said I was all about equality and equity, the top 100 cooperatives outperformed the ASX 200 for gender diversity and leadership roles across 2023. So that is our CEO roles and also chair, the role of chair across the board. So you can see there that as cooperatives are much more progressive based on the numbers, much more progressive thinking perhaps than some of the other listed companies that we're compared with. So that's a little bit about cooperatives. I guess now thought we could talk a little bit around my observations through the 3-week European Affordable Housing Study Tour. It sounds exciting and it sounds cool. It was certainly all those things, but it was equally not about checking out sites and all the sightseeing and different things. It was a very tight agenda of site visits across many different cooperative housing institutions, estates. We visited a number of cooperative banks across Europe and met with just so many different experts in this field to really learn and understand what some of the global best practices might look like in the affordable housing space that we could potentially bring back to Australia into our respective fields and industries to adopt and help shift the dial. So essentially, the tour itself was organised by the BCCM, which is the Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals. They're our major advocacy group in Australia. They help champion the cause, the cooperative and mutual cause, at both the federal and state level. They're the ones that will help, really build awareness of what cooperatives are, what we do, and help with policy and those types of things. Griffith Uni were also involved. For those of you who know, Griffith Uni is seen as a public research uni, strong focus on social innovation and community engagement as well. So off the back of the study tour, and who you'll see there in the picture in front of you, Professor Sitzel Grimstad is our Griffith resident there, who is still in the process of writing a paper on the actual research paper off the back of the study tour that hopefully will be released over the next 4 weeks. So excited to see that come out. But yeah, essentially, the tour involved 9 delegates from a range of different sectors. Obviously myself from banking. We had representatives from the cooperative housing provider space, architects, we had community organisations, housing, and policymakers and some academics. So it was quite a broad mix, really. I wouldn't have picked it otherwise, but a really, really interesting and diverse mix of people coming at the tour from very different angles. So that was us. Kicking off, I guess, where did we go first? The first stop on the tour was Copenhagen. And Copenhagen, I guess I describe as a city of co-living and sustainability. For those of you that have visited parts of Europe, in particular Denmark, you'll know, that some of the challenges we see here today don't exist there. Certainly from a housing perspective, housing is first and foremost seen as and acknowledged as a basic human right. It's not seen as a luxury as we seem to approach it here, at least at a political level. So once kind of get past that that minor obstruction, it becomes a lot easier, I think, to navigate through the different challenges and social constructs to deliver something that to the people that they absolutely need, and do it in a really respectful way. And that was certainly something we saw in Copenhagen. Around 40% of Copenhagen's housing stock is within the cooperative model. So what that means is the residents have essentially purchased into a cooperative estate or a cooperative model. And that would be a small percentage of the value of the property, one of the properties, or an average value of the property within that particular building or estate. And that gives them a shared equity or some sort of shareholding, I guess you could call it, into that particular building. So they can take that with them. They can hand it down to a family member in the event that they pass away. It's something that they own, and they don't own it until they pass it on, or they, in the instance, like I said, that they pass away. So they don't see that they do pay an annual rental sort of contribution, monthly rental contribution as well, but they don't see that as rent. It's kind of going into a collective fund that helps with the upkeep. Apartments will become, run down over the years. So those funds that they're all contributing into that collective account will go towards upgrading and renovating different apartments over the years, the general upkeep of an apartment, a whole range of things that, they're all very proud, I guess, to contribute towards. And can see real value in. Coming back to that whole housing piece is a human right, a basic human right. I guess it's quite a diverse mix of different houses in Copenhagen. You've got a diverse mix of different people who all have very different needs, lifestyles, families, seniors, students, artists, environmentalists. A really interesting site that we visited was that top left photo there that you see. It's actually a small village that's been built out of old shipping containers. And the land was gifted to the estate from a cemetery. So it actually overlooks a cemetery. And so I guess in Australia, we might kind of look at that and think, ooh, would we want to live right next to a cemetery or be looking out over a cemetery? For the residents that live in this particular estate, they're a combination of uni students and refugees. And so the strategy behind the mix of different people in terms of their background is the students get a discounted or subsidised rental amount to live in this particular estate because they are co-living or co-sharing with refugees. And the purpose behind that was so that the students would spend time in the communal areas that were all created by design to introduce a lot of the refugees into the Denmark or Copenhagen way of life, help them with language, help them to integrate into the community in a way that was not forced, but was done very organically and was done in a way that allowed them to build really strong friendships and bonds. And that was through, like I said, a lot of the communal areas that were built, kitchens, shared kitchens where they can come together and have conversation, to cook and share their food in terms of different culture, and study together, but equally learn about one another, and just a really powerful way of not just providing accommodation or living, but by actually leaning into some of the societal and cultural challenges that I think we have here today in Australia, where we don't think enough about how we place people, where we place people, and the care that really needs to go into that whole process so that people feel supported, especially refugees and immigrants, that they're supported through that integration process, coming into a completely foreign country and a culture they're just not aware of. So I just thought that was such a brilliant way of approaching a challenge, rather than just the government wiping their hands of it and just expecting everyone to just work it out. The other element when we talk about sort of sustainability within Copenhagen is just the picture on the top right. Just I could not get over how many charging stations there were on every single street, on every single corner. And I think 90% of the cars that I saw driving around were all electric vehicles. So the infrastructure and the investment in infrastructure has been, made no doubt over many years, but it's something that people don't even need to second guess. It's just there. All of the estates and the housing cooperatives, co-ops have been retrofitted with this type of capability and this type of resource, which just makes it, like I said, a no-brainer for people to, when purchasing a car, it's obviously an electric vehicle. The bottom left image is just a picture of one of the communal gardens in one of the estates that we visited. It's just an old, really old tram that's been retrofitted into just a storage area. But again, we visited the garden and there were about 18 or so residents that were in the garden, planting different vegetables, different flowers and different plants, and just having conversation like they were all best friends, but they're just their neighbours. And it just struck me as something really interesting. And I'm sure that we have instances like that here in Australia, but certainly not to the extent that I had seen anywhere here. And I feel like we have this view here in Australia that we're very individualistic. We need big houses, and we need our own space. But certainly in Copenhagen and in most of the places that we visited, there is just this warmth for others, this sense of community and coming together. And that is the real value in the housing model and the way it's been structured, is the relationships that are built through that process and the friendships that forge from that, and to the extent that many of them seemed more like family than they were neighbours. So yeah, just really interesting, the sort of thinking that it doesn't look pretty. That was one of my observations. It's quite judgmental, I know. But I kept thinking, okay, this isn't the prettiest thing, but again, it didn't need to be. There wasn't a sort of priority around the aesthetic. It was the value that it was creating. And again, I just thought it was an interesting challenge for me and probably many people, how we think about the aesthetics of some of these buildings that don't need to be perfectly manicured and perfectly designed. They just need to be purposeful, and they just need to be engaging and be a space that people can functionally use. And then near credit, the final photo there, the bottom right, was one of the banks that we visited. It's a customer-owned bank or a cooperative bank. And one of the things that really struck me about the visit there and our meeting with the executives was Near Credit are actually seen as a specialist in the cooperative space. And what I mean by that is Near Credit actually provide counsel, advice, strategy to cooperatives around how to improve their business model and enhance them, so that they are commercially viable, self-sustaining, and that they do not go belly up, I guess. And I just thought, wow, can you imagine like trusting a bank with providing, counsel and advice and recommendation around housing, like housing that is not necessarily generating the bank revenue, housing that is actually serving a purpose and is adding value to a community, making sure that it can be sustained and it can be viable. I just thought was just a really interesting take, a completely different approach than what I've seen certainly in the Australian industry. So that was Copenhagen. Vienna, very similar as well in terms of the housing and access to housing. Really, there's no concern from the residents and the community around where will I be able to find safe and secure housing. Again, it's a human right. So there is assurance that people will have it, very similar to Copenhagen. You can move into or purchase into a shared equity cooperative model. There are also rental cooperative models as well. And each will have their pros and cons depending on the individuals and what they're looking for. But there are caps and ceilings on rental increases. So residents aren't just entering into 12-month rental agreements like we do here in Australia. I think the latest numbers I saw were that 90% of Australian rental agreements are either a 12-month or less agreement or term, which is obviously quite concerning when you think about housing security. That doesn't exist in any of these three countries that we visited. There is no ceiling. There is just 100% certainty when it comes to housing security. So again, you've got a government that is supporting that is endorsing that is mandating that is protecting its citizens. And again, the broader observation and I think reason for that, in my opinion, is that housing is seen as a basic human right. It's high quality in Vienna too. So everything aesthetically, but if you've been there before, this was my first time, everything's just absolutely beautiful. So the aesthetic and you know the way that a lot of the older buildings have been retrofitted that have sort of respected the architecture and the design, but to bring them into the 21st century and serve a current purpose has been just very well researched, very well considered, and very well delivered. Probably just a couple of comments on the Vienna tour. The top picture and that middle picture there, the middle picture is a display of the estate that you see in the top picture. So it was a by design social and affordable housing city essentially that was built. It's about 35-40 minutes out of the Vienna capital or CBD. And the way that had been designed in terms of even just the use of some of the probably more unattractive components, you might think there was a train line, a concrete train line that was raised, and the way that the estate had utilised that space was to fill in underneath the train line with basketball courts and just activity areas for kids to play. So what would have otherwise been a really unattractive and probably bit of an eyesore was redesigned into something that was heavily utilised by the youth within the community, and aesthetically looked again was purposeful, but it took away from this concrete monstrosity and made it something really interesting and really usable. The estate itself again was I think again progressive thinking. Every single street in this estate was named after a woman, a female, and someone who is accomplished. So a sort of real homage to female inventors, to female business people, with just every single street. And I just thought, that there is the designer that we met with was telling us how when it comes to naming streets, there is this almost unconscious bias that plays out, where in 90% of cases, where it is a name that is used, it is a male name. So they decided to flip that and be intentional with the way that they wanted to sort of challenge the status quo around gender equity. So again, just an interesting fact and just an interesting approach to something that we probably don't often think about too consciously. The bottom image there is another cooperative estate that we visited, which was actually a seniors cooperative estate. So the residents there are all sitting around the table. They or standing up around the table. They were incredibly generous hosts, and they took us through the apartment complex. What was interesting, I thought, again, was that sense of friendship, that sense of family, and the spaces that had been designed and built into the model that allowed for their own family members to come and stay. So there were separate apartments that had been retrofitted and designed for the residents' own children or grandchildren to come and stay with them for a weekend. They would use a bit of a booking system, and you know, the family then got to know the other residents, and it just became this. It's literally like just a big warm fuzzy, you know, hug that we got going in there. They just were so welcoming, and the other thing that really struck me was they all, when we talked about how they had ended up in this particular estate or in this particular cooperative, they talked about how it was their almost duty to, once their children had grown up and left their homes, and you know, they were either left as a couple in these bigger homes or these bigger houses, or unfortunately in some instances on their own, that, you know, they wanted to make that space available for another family to come and make it their home and create their own memories in. And I just thought that was such a selfless and interesting thing to say and thing to do, that I even thought, you know, myself, would I do that? I'm not quite sure. But this is the sort of some of the cultural differences that we noticed and observed, was that, you know, there is this real acknowledgement that housing is something that, you know, we're all responsible for, and at different times of our lives, we will need to make changes to our housing or living situation to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to, you know, experience either a bigger home if they're a bigger family, and or then maybe downsize at different stages when you don't need the space. So a really interesting sort of cultural experience and difference there that I wasn't expecting. And then, you know, finishing up at Zurich, this was really interesting. Again, very similar observations in terms of the housing stock and to both Vienna and Copenhagen. Not a lot of differences there, but one of the examples that really stuck out was the top right picture, the bottom right picture, and the bottom left is the same housing co-op or estate. It's about a 15-story building that was built, purpose-built as a co-op for a bunch of people that just thought that they might, you know, let's build our own housing co-op and move in. That way we get to design it and we get to sort of retrofit it the way that we want. So some of the German banks over in Zurich will actually lend to individuals literally off the street to fund a housing co-op construction like this. So what you're seeing there is a couple of things. Up the top, obviously space is somewhat challenging in areas of Zurich. So the desire was to ensure that people still had access to a garden, got grass growing on the top of the roof, there's a sauna, there's a sunroom, there's another area for yoga and all sorts of things that people can come up and get that natural light, but also get some fresh air with the grass rather than sort of downstairs, which was predominantly concrete. The bottom right, you've got a communal area for woodworking. There are a number of residents that really enjoyed building, you know, different pieces of furniture and whatnot, and are very hands-on. And so they decided that they would provide that space, which, as you can see, is very well used. And then the top right, you've got the communal pantry, which is actually a co-op within a co-op. So the residents of the co-op decided to set up another co-op for their food. And this is sort of touching on what I mentioned earlier around this sort of, you know, co-ops really empower a lot more economies of scale and buying power, that they're able to all contribute into a fund for food, and then they all take turns in doing a bulk order. They can go direct to wholesale and again cut out the middle person, and save considerable amounts of money in the process, at which they're able to just come into the pantry and take bits and pieces as they choose. Another big communal kitchen in this building that I don't have a photo of in this presentation, but again, you know, very common to have, and we were invited to a lunch on this particular day, but a communal gathering, whether it be a morning tea, a lunch, or a dinner, is quite a regular thing. Again, neighbours are seen more than just neighbours. It's about looking out for one another and supporting one another to really make these types of models work. They still get on one another's nerves, I was told, but they have a very democratic process to try and resolve those particular issues. In this particular site, we're also introduced to a model, a sociocracy model, which again sort of leans into the cooperative board model. So you have a chair and you have members of the board who make all the important decisions for the co-op. But what sat underneath the board was what we call, what's called circles of sociocracy circles. And the members or residents of the housing co-op are all able to participate in different circles based on the theme of the circle. There might be an area that they're really passionate about. So one circle might be the bike garage, which they have in all of these homes, hundreds and hundreds of bikes. It's phenomenal. One might be the pantry. One might be the woodworking. So and it goes on and on. So they'll have one leader of the circle who will run those circle meetings. They'll have discussion, make decisions, and feed that back up. So you've got more people essentially who have a say or have a voice versus just a board. And it was just a really interesting and different style and approach. I thought that seemed to work really well and really lent into that whole concept of cooperatives being a very democratic model, I guess, and somewhere that where everyone can have a say and can have a voice. So that was, excuse me, that was the end of the trip in terms of Zurich. Certainly a lot of lessons and opportunities. I won't go necessarily through all of these just for time, but look, and I have covered a few of them, but I think first and foremost, you know, access to safe, secure and affordable housing should really be just a basic human right. I think we subscribe as a country to a number of different, how do I say, perhaps a number of different, not legislation, but a number of different policies around housing being a human right, but we don't necessarily enforce them. We don't necessarily enact them in this country. So I believe that maybe even Tasmania is the only state that has actually tackled that and taken that on at a state level. Perhaps some of the jurisdictions and different layers of government make that a little bit more complicated, but all the more reason for us to lean in and tackle it, right? There's an opportunity for us to, I guess, enhance community engagement and participation in affordable housing, as is happening right now, which I think is fantastic that this group exists and that you get to kind of come together and talk about this and learn about new things. But I think we've got to certainly tackle this at a broader level and a bigger level so that we can encourage people to start thinking about housing not as just a massive big home that you must aspire to own, but that housing should be something that is just simply, it is safe and it is secure and it is affordable. So it doesn't need to be necessarily ownership, but it could be a form of ownership, like some form of shared equity, as we've seen.
Let me tune into my Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. There's the
John, can I just ask you, would you mind putting yourself on mute? Just for, we're all on mute apart from the speaker. Thanks a lot. Thanks, John. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you. The other piece was around diversifying funding sources and mechanisms for affordable housing. So I think even looking at the waterfall-based CLT model, we do need to think very differently as financial institutions around how we support and enable those models. You know, I've seen firsthand in Europe how it can work incredibly well, and as it has done for a very, very long time. We can do that too. We can replicate that. We just need to think a little bit more progressively and think more about how do we break the mold without breaking the bank, so to speak. So certainly looking at different ways that we can fund these types of housing models and how do we really leverage the social impact of investment and things like crowdfunding. So there are a number of different ways I think that we can take that forward. And then the housing preferences and you know, this fixation on these big homes. I know I've mentioned it already, but we do really need to rethink what that means and why that's important to us. I know that there are a lot of cultural reasons for that here in Australia, particularly as we sort of were building the country out post World War II in particular. We had a lot of space, we had a lot of opportunity and prosperity to do that. The situation is very different today, and we have, for the first time, I think, in our history, started to see the rate of home ownership drop for the very first time and the rate of rental increase. And as we know, with the insecurity that comes with rental agreements here in this country, that is alarming. So there's something that needs to change there, and we have a lot of unoccupied rooms in homes that are needed by a lot of people that don't have enough space. So look, and then I've obviously got in there fostering CLT models as well as another one, and I know everyone's on the same page there, but certainly flying the fat flag there and making sure that we are really promoting a diverse range of different housing models and solutions, not just one or two. So something that's really important in terms of takeaway. I guess from a cooperative banking perspective, how can cooperative banks
That might have been bad timing. It looks, at my end, it looks like we've lost Mark. Has everyone else lost Mark? Can you shake your heads if you have? Yeah, okay. How disappointing is that? We're just getting to the punchline. He might try and log in, I think, Rose.
His name's still up.
His name's still up, but we've lost his picture, which makes me think he's frozen. So, is he coming back? No, we've now really lost him. Okay, how disappointing. I did say it was an experiment, right? I think that Mark will probably try to rejoin us. So what I was going to say before we opened up to conversation is that I thought it was really interesting thinking about these things from an urban perspective. We've had a fair amount of experience thinking about multiple occupancies and co-ops in out of town. You know, this is one of the areas that has a lot of knowledge about that. And there is a nascent housing co-op sector in Australia, and there are some examples of urban housing co-ops, but there's not many. And so I found it really interesting, you know, seeing the photos of, sorry, Mark's just texted me, seeing the photos of, you know, high density urban co-ops. I'll just read the text. He's lost power at work. He's dialing back in. Here he comes. Excellent. You've got to laugh, eh? I can see that he's connecting to audio.
Hey!
Yay! Excellent. Poor Mark. Lost power. Can you hear us, Mark?
He's on mute.
You're on mute. You're back.
Me?
Excellent.
So sorry. So, this is hilarious. So I am working in the office today because we had a notification where I live that our power was going to be out all day, and our power just went out here in Coffs. So
And we were just getting to a really interesting slide.
I know. How's that for convenience? So apologies. Do you want me just to kind of keep going, Kerry? Is that okay?
I think that'd be great. I was just saying that as we were waiting for you, how interesting it is to see images of housing co-ops in urban settings, because we've got a fair amount of experience in this area of you know, out of town based co-ops and multiple occupancies, which have some of the features that you're talking about, but are, you know, not in an in-town context. I mean, we have a small rental co-op here, but it's not a model that's very familiar in urban settings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's part of the problem too, isn't it? That yeah, what might work in a sort of in a city or CBD sort of setting won't necessarily work in a regional or rural location, and often regional or rural locations are neglected as well. So yeah, but no, very different, and sustainability being such a big focus, the sort of use of different materials. I know in Vienna in particular, there's actually a lot of laws that have been mandated around the use of timber now. So they're actually going back to timber. That concrete is a massive contributor of carbon emissions, or the use of concrete. So the use of regenerative timber is obviously seen as a lot more sustainable. So they're now challenged, or they've been challenged to think differently about design and build using more timber. But when you're doing a lot of multi-story dwellings, the use of, say, a certain percentage of timber makes things very tricky. So there's a lot of innovation happening in that construction space over there as well, which is really exciting and interesting to see. So
great. I'll just take a quick reading. I think I'm assuming that slide we were about to see was one of the last.
Yes, it's the last.
Okay, so will we go back to that last slide and just, because that would be great to get your reflections on that, if you're able to share the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I might just sort of, perhaps I just talk to them, and there's just a few, and but look, certainly in terms of how cooperative banks can learn, in terms of the ways that we can work and support affordable housing initiatives better. Look, certainly there's an opportunity for us to continue strengthening relationships and trust that we have across the community, to help differentiation between the two, cooperative banks versus listed banks, why we exist, and to sort of gain more support so that we can en masse support more of these types of initiatives than we're able to today. And then equally how we work together as cooperative banks as well. I mean, some of the work that is happening with the Waterfall Way Community Land Trust today has resulted in the build out of a consortium of lenders. And so I'm working with two other local customer-owned banks currently to basically support the CLT model, to address some of the risks as a bank that we can't necessarily overlook. One of the risks that we always have to factor in is what we call concentration risk. So we need to be very mindful about the percentage of property that we're funding in a particular location. If there was a downward event in market and property values fell, if we are overexposed, it can have a massive impact on our ratings and our ability to sort of maintain ourselves as as an ADI or an Australian deposit taking institution. So when we come at it together, we can do more and we can solve more of the problems. So that's actually something that's in flight. Continuing to advocate for policy change is another one. I mean, we're looking at, with these new models, consideration hasn't been given for things like, guarantees on the security to help us manage risk and then pass on lower interest rates to our customers as well. So we just need to make sure that, we're having conversations with the policymakers, and that we, are taking them on this journey, and that they are considering that when they, start their political tours and start making promises to the general public. I think, continuing to push our advocacy network. So BCCM, I mentioned earlier, COBA is another one, the Customer and Banking Association, making sure that they're helping to advocate at a national level as well around what's needed. And we are collectively, we are big customers of COBA and BCCM. So holding them, I guess, to account to an extent, and making sure that they're doing the right thing on behalf of us, which should be essentially for our community and for our customers. Looking at this whole piece around different funding mechanisms as well. So we need to get a little bit more creative around how we collect capital, how we, what we do with that capital, maybe more dedicated funding mechanisms for affordable housing, specifically for affordable housing purposes. I kind of have this really idealistic vision that I think, as a customer in banks, we can kind of pool some of our capital together and do something a little bit more creative in this space than we're currently doing. We're currently working a little bit too competitively, and that needs to, I think, shift as we move forward with these types of causes. And then just making sure that we're investing in more research and we're making sure that we've got the finger on the pulse in terms of what's changing, what's needed, what our community members are demanding. Our products need to make sure that they're keeping pace with that change. That a traditional home loan product, as an example, doesn't necessarily work with a new affordable housing model or in a new affordable housing model. Policies don't work, so we need to make sure that we are adapting to those changes, and we're pushing the regulators as much as we can to encouraging them to consider some of the changes that need to happen in the way that they sort of regulate us as an industry. So there's quite a few things there, and I mean I might pause there because I'm conscious I'm going to take up all the time, and but lots of learnings and certainly lots of opportunity, and in this instance hopefully that we're able to integrate into the CLT model and take forward. So thanks, Kerry.
It was such a really interesting presentation, Mark. I've got so many questions I'd like to ask you over lunch one day. I won't take up all the space to do it now, but I know if we were all in the room together, everyone would be clapping you with a round of applause and appreciation. So that's what we're doing now.
It's my pleasure.
And I'd just really like to open up for any questions or, Cameron's even got an animated clap on his.
Oh.
I'm impressed. I need to learn how to do that. So really open up for any questions or comments, and let people know Marg is sitting next to me. We had a little IT problem, so she's come in and is sitting in the office as well. So yes, any questions or comments that anyone would like to share, now's your chance.
I'll ask them.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. Oh. Thank you so much for the presentation and your work in our CLT project. Do you see any? Australia has a very sort of very straight line view on how you fund things, and I'm wondering, can you see a role for superannuation or the huge funds that superannuations own to be part of the solution?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Mark. And I think actually a lot of the earlier cooperative banks were originally funded through superannuation mechanisms. So it's something that's kind of come and gone, and when I sit down with Melina at the BCCM, it's one of the areas that she actually calls out quite often, that we need to get more of our super funds behind some of these capital mechanisms and instruments that are needed to there's just so much money, as you know, that sits in those funds. I know one of the delegates who came on the study tour is the CEO of a company called Key Invest. They also have a subsidiary company that's a non-bank lender. And he has actually been working on I think he's currently road showing, but has been working on a number of new products in that capital space that he's targeting superannuation funds through. So they are sort of leaning into areas where historically only the big banks have been able to invest in. And so I think some of the limitations there have been that they want certain types of returns to invest because they have shareholders, whereas these funding mechanisms or capital instruments are focused more on affordable housing. So that they are more about what the members need and want, and what's good for ethically for the country as well. So there's a slightly different lens to these particular mechanisms that he's applying. So I don't think there's anything sort of like it today. It's something that's relatively new, but I'm hopeful that it will gain traction quickly, and it'll be something that we start to see real movement on in this industry. More and more like-minded organisations coming together to invest in these types of pools. So yeah, it's just it's always at conflict, because obviously we live in a very we live in a capitalist world, so everyone wants a return, and so when you're trying to, I guess, fund something that is more about safe, secure housing, affordable housing, the returns aren't always what they might be. We're invested in another, a massive multi-story development where they might allocate some pissy amount, like maybe 15% to social housing or affordable housing. The rest is, sort of on the market apartments that they're selling to make massive profits. So I think, yeah, that there's so much opportunity in the super space that it's not funny. And yeah, I'm going to be keen to see how Key Invest go with this new product, and how quickly they're able to sort of raise some money and start investing it into affordable housing solutions. So.
Hi, could I ask a question?
Go for it, Francis. Thanks, Smart, for the super thinking.
No.
Yeah, thank you for that. Super thinking.
It is.
Yeah.
Boom, boom.
Yeah, look, Mark, I'm really, thank you so much for being here. And it must have been a really exciting trip there. It must have been so interesting. Just something you were referring to there before about like having more sort of flexible ways of providing funding for affordable housing. I had a bit of a project years ago where we were going to be able to provide housing for about $50,000 for a 2-bedroom sort of, where you bring them in on a truck and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so $50,000, maybe, well, just for the basic outline, and then maybe another 50 to make them more workable. But I went around various institutions, and they said, well, if you wanted to get a loan for a car, we could give you 50, but not for a house.
No.
And I found that really disappointing for obvious reasons.
Absolutely.
And so something like that, I mean, it was an awesome project. And we do you see what I mean? So we was just stonkered on that level.
Yeah. And it is interesting because most banks will have a similar approach in terms of policy. They'll model it off one another, but for the most part, a lot of it will come from the regulator in terms of what is allowed to be treated as what we call a standard mortgage versus a non-standard mortgage. And then every time we lend either against a standard or a non-standard mortgage, we need to provision a certain percentage of capital as an organisation against that mortgage. So if it is a non-standard, as an example, it's a high risk. If it's standard, it's a low risk. So less capital is needing to be provisioned, or more capital, either side. So it'll come down to sort of the way that we fund our lending, whether it's retail deposits or term deposits or wholesale funding, securitizations, a whole range of different finance mechanisms. But this is the traditional nature and the conventional nature of the way that we do business as banks in Australia. And it's one of the things that we kind of need to start shifting our thinking on, in terms of, well, how else can we, I agree with you, how else can we use our capital in a way that is low risk, because we need to maintain our rating, our high ratings, that is not going to set people up for failure as well, our customers up for failure, but is also going to solve for some of these sort of social challenges and affordable housing issues at the same time. It's something that I would love to, obviously Wave will want to go, right, we're doing this and this and this. I have a risk person, a chief risk officer over here who will constantly temper my very enthusiastic thoughts about stuff that we can, change and do differently. And then our finance team as well. But look, I think as some of these models start to evolve and we start to see that they work and that they're fine, like, the sky is not going to fall, I think we'll be in a position to sort of be a little bit more comfortable to try new things. But yeah, I think your point is 100% valid, and it's a point of frustration that you can buy a car and you can go anywhere and it's fine, but you can't buy a relocatable home and put it on land and mortgage that. It certainly doesn't feel right, and they should be the types of things that we're trying to create workarounds for today more than any other time, because people are living in their cars. So
Yes.
that's
Exactly.
the ironic,
It's
kind of.
completely ironic, and this is going to be, we did our sums, and it was going to be affordable for somebody on the dole or on a pension. They could end up, I think it was like in 7 years, owning their own home for paying just a kind of a, not even a normal rent amount, because 50 grand, over a few years. And it would have been completely affordable. People would have owned their own homes, but the land, they wouldn't be owning the land. It was a different type of system. And it would have been completely amazing for people, but just that whole financing thing puts a stop to it. So that, it'd be so good if that could be somehow worked through.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, can I jump in for a sec? Because
Yeah.
I think that your opening remarks, Mark, about housing as a human right is so fundamentally important, and that requires a huge, in our society, quite a lot of rethinking, which then will drive, if we do get to the point where we as a society embrace that, will then drive a whole lot of changes, because the way the whole system works at the moment, and this conversation is a good example of many ways, is that the driver isn't about housing because people need housing. It's about housing as a commodity. And I think that the way that you opened the presentation was terrific, that, it really is about going back to basics and first order principles. And that will then drive a whole lot of changes into the way that we do this thing called housing in this country.
Yeah, I think, and I know banking generally cops a lot of flack in terms of profits and profiteering and gouging and all sorts of things. I think the banking industry works the way that our laws and the way that our bylaws and jurisdictions force it almost to behave. And that's not to excuse it. That is just, it is allowed to operate within the environment that has been created over many years in a way that, to your point, Kerry, is not in the best interests necessarily of people all the time. It is often, not in the best interest of people in terms of housing, but certainly in the best interest of shareholders. So there is all, where there is a shareholder who is not the member, the owner, there will always be a level of conflict in terms of the strategic priorities of the organisation. So, did I talk about cooperatives and why they're really cool?
Are there any last questions? Vicky, you putting your hand up? I think I can see Vicky and then Doran. You'll have to go off mute, Vic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I think I got that about the level of risk and the non-standard type of house. So what you're saying is a $50,000 house is so non-standard that the lender doesn't get enough bang for their buck loaning out, because they're having to weigh this money against to protect their level of risk, right? Okay, so I get that.
Well, it's a little more dynamic, because what it will be is it'll depend. If the house is a relocatable home, they might assess and assume the risk is the house could be moved. If there's something not quite standard about the land in terms of the title and the way it's been titled, they might assess that as a risk. It's easier for the bank, by and large, just to say no versus come at it at a very sort of bespoke or case by case basis. It's lazy is essentially what it is. But we will have to provision, if it's non-standard for any of those reasons, and even if we chose to actually lend, this is just, when I say we, I just mean like banking in general. We would have to provision 100% of the value of that loan for risk purposes. Should the loan go bad, we need to have that money sitting there in reserve at all times, and that's something that's imposed on us by the regulator.
Right.
If it's standard mortgage, so just a standard home in, say, Bellingen, it's residentially zoned, it's a lot less. It might be 20, 30%. It's a lot less. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good puzzle. I'll be thinking about that one. I'll be thinking about how to do that. But what I've come across lately is for a series of appalling decisions, I ended up penniless and going into debt. And so I got a reverse mortgage after investigating it fully and talking to my lawyer and making sure I had an exit strategy, and it has been just the ticket. And my son and I are using this to the best of our ability to leverage some income from our two properties.
Yep.
I'm sure hope that the BCU's got reverse mortgages coming down the road, because all my interest is going to Queensland right now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Very, very good timing, actually. So our other brand in the West Coast, PNN, have got reverse mortgages, and they've literally just started having those conversations now. Should we have them? And the way that I'm looking at it is, does this kind of contribute towards the affordable housing solution for us as part of our broader strategy or not? And I haven't quite sort of sense checked that with anyone in community yet. So it would be interesting. Yeah, this is really interesting. It's a very polarizing product, I will say.
It is. I would love to be like an advocate and make sure people understand and know what they're doing and how to use it, and and not to be ruined by it. So
it's an interesting one. I have worked for an organization that has offered this product before. I think where we've had challenges hasn't been from our borrower, our customer, it's been from their children. There are, and look, I think certainly where I'm probably more comfortable with the product today is with some of the changes coming around elder abuse, where and coercive control and financial abuse. Is that as an individual, you should be able to do whatever you choose and take any type of product that you choose that is in your best interest. Where, like I said, where we've had challenges in the past with this product has been that family members are not comfortable with it. There is a concern around inheritance. But like I said, there are legislative changes coming that, trying to control parents and their assets is some form of, almost in certain circumstances, a form of coercive control and financial abuse. So you should be free to make decisions that are best for your financial security. And if this is a product that enables and empowers you to live your life the way that you would like to live your life, then I think it sounds like a great product.
Yeah, I think that we need some tweaking for it in our projects.
Yeah. I'd be keen to chat some more with you about it, Vicky. I think I'd love to understand even the process you've gone through, where you are, how that's been, and are there any sort of components of the policy or the product that you're not too enthusiastic about, but what's good as well, I think would be really helpful.
Happy to do that after Saturday. She moves in.
Okay.
I'm still painting.
Great. No, I'd love to.
We'll link you both up.
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
No worries. Thank you for today, and I'll shut up now and put myself
No,
back.
that's good. Thank you. Thanks for coming, listening.
I think we might give Doran the last question. Doran's one of the elders of the multiple occupancy movement, who was really fundamentally involved in doing the work on the initial legislation that made multiple occupancies in New South Wales possible. So I think it's very fitting that we turn to you, Doran, as
Hi,
we.
Doran.
Hi.
I should be doing
the the Copenhagen and Vienna and Zurich. Thinking about Europe and on the whole, I think I'm correct in saying they are used to having flats, apartments, and they're used to having long-term arrangements for renting and so on. And I think, is that an advantage for them and a disadvantage for, we haven't got that sort of situation in
No.
Australia.
Yeah, it's a really great question because nor am I an historian, but certainly what we heard on the tour was, off the back of World War II and, obviously the devastation that was left there through all the bombings and whatnot, that there was a push to very quickly re-establish housing for the residents of many of those cities. And perhaps it was more about what can we build quickly that can house as many people as possible, and that being apartments and sort of stacked on one another. And so our journey to where we are today, if we compare Australia with that part of Europe in particular, is very different, culturally very different. We are coming at this from so many different lenses. So it is. I don't know whether it's a stretch too far or, to expect that we could potentially think differently about our living arrangements here. We, like I think Kerry mentioned before as well, we have this sort of urban such the spread, the urban spread and the city spread of Australia is just so vast and diverse that how do you kind of have one approach for all regions across the country is very difficult. But I think where it makes sense, I think could be something, could certainly be something that we challenge the status quo, and certainly in our city locations, and perhaps even in some of our sort of bigger regional areas, that it might be more about community versus convenience. So who wants to get to a certain point in their life and live on their own necessarily in a big home? Perhaps a lot of people still do. I couldn't personally think of anything worse. I just end up going crazy from talking to myself all day because I just don't stop talking. So, but I think we have to acknowledge there are differences. Absolutely, there are cultural differences, and just historically how we have all arrived where we are today, very different. But something has got to give, and I think we have been on a property boom here in Australia for 30 years. And everyone keeps saying and thinking it's got to end, it's got to end. Well, I mean, if it ends, we have a lot of people in a lot of mess. So I think we just need to start being really mindful about planning, and really mindful about how we house people, and whether it's an education process as well with our youth to get them thinking very differently about what housing is versus what you should be aspiring to own. These massive McMansions with theatre rooms and triple garages, and every bedroom has an ensuite. It's just we have the space, but I mean it's just we don't have the space either. So it's just it's a bit of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a difficult one.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think you've given
Thanks,
us lots to think about, Mark.
Yeah, I still have a lot to think about as well. So absolutely. No, look, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me. I mean, I'm obviously really enjoying working with the CLT. I'm looking forward to all the support that we can offer there. And Kerry, I'm lighting a bit of a fire under many people and many organisations to help fly the flag of this model. I think it just is such a great opportunity for the Bellingen community, and it's so needed. It's just so needed. So yeah, I'm really appreciative that you thought to invite me along, and
We're pleased to have you on the team, Mark.
glad to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry.
I realised I made a big mistake at the very beginning when I should have said this session has been recorded. I know it was implicit in what we've said, but we have recorded it so that we can then turn it into some ongoing resource that other people can use. So I just meant to make that explicit in the beginning. So I hope that everybody is comfortable with that. Great. And thank you, Mark. And we might get you face to face at one of our sessions one day.
Would love to. Look forward to it.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining, and keen for some feedback about the fact that we've done this online and how that went for you. You could flick an email to Rose and me. That would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mark. It was great. Bye.
Bye.